Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you're wondering why a man might choose one woman over another? I think this is a great conversation to have. And quite frankly, I actually got the idea of this title or this content from several of my contemporaries who've posted the exact same title. And I thought, let me give it a shot. And I perused some of their videos and I want to comment on those as well. Additionally, I do want to share with you, I'm going to give you my perspective on this because this actually relates a little bit to my relationship with my sweetheart, Marie, who's back behind me in the picture. All right, so I want to be candid with you. One of my contemporaries did the whole feminine energy that, you have to let a man be a man you just sit in your feminine energy, let the man control the dynamic, okay? And I think there's this narrative out there that there's this expectation that all men are James Bond, or confident and virile and all this stuff, and they just want that feminine type of woman who just sits there and does his bidding, if you will. And I know they're not selling it that way because, of course, they're going to sell you on your own confidence and whatnot. But to some degree, that's the expectation. And the reality is men these days, especially midlife men, they've got flaws. They're riddled with flaws. It used to be men would say that they are rather easy, just feed them, give them sex, and leave them alone when they're watching TV. And yet I'm going to be candid with you, that's not the case. Men are rather complex. They're dealing with childhood wounds and traumas and adult traumas that makes it very difficult for them to actually lean into a healthy, happy relationship. So today I want to talk about some things that I believe are some of the reasons why one man would choose a one woman over the other. And I think it's important to recognize that because of these devices. By the way, I want to apologize. The lighting here keeps going back and forth. So I'm going to turn off a light real quick. Don't leave the camera yet. Don't leave yet. I'm just too embarrassed. And as you can tell, I don't do any editing here. I like to do stream of consciousness, but I do use a orange light to try to balance things out. And that doesn't seem to be working. Okay. So I do believe because of the internet, men in particular, and women, excuse me, have access to people they never would have been in contact in their life. So this barrage of people has caused this problem of thinking that there is just so many options. We call it the paradox of choice. And because of this paradox of choice, men are oftentimes might meet somebody that they think is a good fit for them, but they go, you know what, there might be somebody better. There might be somebody better. So one of the issues is that men and women are both dealing with this paradox of choice. And because of that, I think it's desensitized people or overly sensitized people to not really understanding the real value of a relationship. In fact, these days, I've said it before, I'll say it again, today's dating is just more of a strung out long version of friends with benefits with some monogamy and exclusivity built in. But most folks aren't building the deep roots of trust and the deep roots of commitment very early on to establish a long-term relationship. That's what I teach in my private coaching. By the way, if you need some support, there's a link right here. To schedule a discovery call with me to see if working with the coach is right for you. And there's links below as well. So coming back to this, there's just all these choices out there that's making it more challenging. Now, I will tell you that some men choose a woman over another woman because that other woman is less effort. And what that means is there are some lifestyle differences. Now, we see this frequently. And I've talked to women, by the way, what I'm sharing is true for men and women alike. I've talked to women who said that they don't want to get involved with men who are raising small children. Well, that might be the same case for men as well. Some women are less effort in that, and that's more of a compatibility issue we'll talk about in a moment. But more importantly, they're less effort in trying to arrange a date. Okay? In other words, some women are very high maintenance. It's very difficult to arrange a date with a woman. And so we're going to choose the path of least resistance because there are so many available options out there that are vying for our time. By the way, my coffee says, I make the world go around. What do you do? A little bit narcissistic, I would believe. Let me pull out my trusty notes because I want to share with you some of the other thoughts I have. Now, here's one particular reason why one man would choose one woman over another, and that is sexual compatibility. That's right, sexual compatibility. These days, obtaining sex is rather easy. I'm sorry to say it that way, but obtaining sex is rather easy. And what happens is that there's a benefit to this, is that when I say benefit to this, it doesn't feel like a benefit to women, but one of the benefits is for men is that they get to try on different women on for size. Now, some men do this right in the early stages. In other words, you just communicate with them and they send a dick pic or something like that. Those are the men that are looking for women who are the low-hanging fruit, okay? Those are the women that are easy to obtain sexually. But the reality is women, you've complained about this as well. Some men you've been with aren't your sexual match. And that does happen frequently. You know, some men are not good lovers. Some women are not good lovers. Just because a woman might have sex with a man doesn't make them compatible in the bedroom. So sexual compatibility, sexual desires is one reason why one man might choose one woman over another. Now, number three, or the third one I wanted to share, at least from my notes, is there's an emotional connection with one woman over another, but more importantly, it's an energetic connection. You know, this is the trickiest one of all. You know, in my particular case, I had connected with several women before I met Marie. And I can say that there was two primary reasons why I think I chose her over the others. And while I felt a connection, or felt some connection with one woman, you know, this is the intangible, this energetic connection. It's something you can't even quantify. It's hard to say, do this to create energetic connection. But the reality is some people you're just more aligned with than others. And when a man feels that energetic connection, I really do believe it goes beyond physicality, because it's not a physical connection. It's more they relate to this person on an emotional level. And quite frankly, as I think of Marie, I think for some reason when we met and connected, I felt an affinity for her more, not just because of her beauty, but more importantly, she just seemed like a good friend. Now, one of the advantages we had is we'd spoken for a year prior to meeting. So we had built up this friendship over the course of a year. And by the way, we didn't do incessant communication. Keep in mind, folks, I was in a long distance, briefly in a long distance relationship. In other words, she moved out here, but we developed a bit of a friendship. So that energetic connection was there quickly when we met, versus meeting someone for the first time, maybe after a few phone calls. Sometimes that energetic connection isn't there because that friendship hasn't been built. Number four, and I talked about less effort, but I really want to dive into compatibility. There's a greater compatibility with some women over the other. So as I said earlier about women choosing men who don't have children as an example, it's true for men as well, especially in midlife. That might be a compatibility issue. There might be a financial compatibility within two people. There might be sexual compatibility, you know, more so with one woman versus another. So these are some of the challenges. And this is why, again, in my private coaching, ladies, I know you all think you know what you want. I say this all the time. Women go to me, I know what I want, I know what I want, I know what I want. But then they go through my proprietary coaching program and then they realize, oh my God, I didn't realize the more important things on the list. This is what I did to attract Marie in my life. We did what was known as radical honesty, pre-qualifying each other. We laid our cards on the table early on to determine, are we really compatible with one another? So for example, she lived in Chicago, I lived in Los Angeles. I said I wasn't interested in entertaining a relationship with you. Okay, and I know many of you are doing the long distance communicating. And quite frankly, these days, long distance is anything more than a 1 hour drive. Actually, in some cases, a 30-minute drive. Okay, in our case, that was 1,800 miles. I wasn't interested in entertaining this relationship. And by the way, she reached out to me because of the distance. Well, then she gave me a good argument of why we should consider, you know, communicating more. And she didn't do it in this masculine energy way. She was just sharing with her that she was actually looking for a life mate. She liked what my profile had to say. She felt the synergy. But more importantly, she grew up in Los Angeles. She has 2 children that live in Los Angeles. One of her dear friends lives literally a block away from where we both live now. Her best friend lives here. So there was some reasons why Los Angeles was on her list of places to consider moving to if she found the right person. By the way, I was competing with Florida as well. So she has to deal with earthquakes over there. We'd have to deal with, she would have had to deal with hurricanes. But compatibility is a critical factor to the higher compatibility, in which some people, again, when we're doing this, when people are doing this circular dating, this cushioning, this duty dating, it makes it difficult because if you don't really know what you want, then you're not quickly eliminating the wrong person. And so be mindful of this, and men are doing this as well. Now, number 5, he's got to be in a good place in his life. I know prior to meeting Marie, folks, I went through the loss of a child. I went through a lot of emotional upheaval in my life. But at the same time, being in a good place, oftentimes when someone's not in a good place in life, in other words, the ground underneath a man is not solid, he could self-sabotage a relationship. Because men want companionship, they want connection, they want sex, and yet if they're not in a good place in their life, they will actually meet someone that they like, but then sabotage the relationship, and believing that another woman could solve the problems he's not solving within himself. By the way, many of you know I wrote a book called What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? A Journey of Personal Development, Self-Help, and Spiritual Work. By the way, there's a link below to get a copy of all the books I recommend. Most men go through, and women do this as well, their own version of the hero's journey. And if you're not familiar with Joseph Campbell's work, write this down: Hero's Journey, Joseph Campbell. If you're watching this on the premiere, someone put this in the chat box or put this in the comment. The hero's journey. This is what my friend Allison Armstrong calls the tunnel. And that's this period of time where we're going through a transition in our lives. And many men are going through a divorce, or they're going through a professional transition in their life. And when they're in this space, they'll oftentimes sabotage really good relationships for another woman. Now, I'm actually doing the reverse here. Instead of picking a good woman, they'll pick the easy woman, because they're not in a good place in their life. So really be mindful of men who are going through a contentious divorce, men who have issues in their professional life. Maybe they have significant health issues that makes them fearful to actually lean into a deeper connection with someone because they're not in a good place. And these men will self-sabotage. In this case, usually choosing women that are less complicated. In other words, very easy. I talk about low-hanging fruit. Number 6, timing. As I said earlier, I was connecting with several women at the time that I met Marie, but this was a timing situation between the two of us. And again, timing, much like energetic connection, is an intangible. You can't really quantify this particular case, where 2 people just meet at the right time. You could literally, some of you could be dating a great, really good man, but then you meet this other person where you have a lot more compatibility, you have a lot more energetic connection. And all of a sudden, this is because of timing. And this is the hardest thing to predict. Most of us would prefer to just date one person at a time, I would believe. I know it might seem like men prefer this duty dating or cushioning. In other words, cushioning is like padding. You're dating multiple people to pad for loss. I'm not a big fan of that, to be protective of oneself because you're fearful of rejection or you're fearful of it going wrong. But again, at the end of the day, timing plays a critical part in this dynamic of mating today. And I think we need to be aware of that. And really, honestly, there's not much you can do about timing for a man. Although I will say this, remember I talked about self-sabotage? Okay, men who are known as the growers or builders, and if you're familiar with my chart about the three types of men who are actively dating out there are the users, there are the spenders, and then there's the grower builders. Users are basically the love bombers. They're the players. They're the women who are entitled. They're the women who are gold diggers. They're using someone else for their own benefit. In other words, they're very myopic. They're very self-centric. They only care about their own needs. Now, the grower and builder, these are men who are truly want to co-create a relationship with someone. They really want to build a life with someone. And this probably only represents about 20% of the men who are actively in the dating marketplace for those of us in midlife. And I always say midlife is after baby making years and before retirement. By the way, I recognize men can make babies even in their 50s and 60s or even 70s. I'm talking about, since my audience is women, baby making years for them, okay? And if a man, coming back to what I was saying before on timing, if he's not in a good place in his life, if the ground underneath him doesn't feel solid, coming back to the previous one, he'll sabotage relationships until he's in a good place. So timing plays an important role. And oftentimes men go through this tunnel we talked about, the hero's journey, as I said earlier. I wanted to elaborate on that. The hero's journey is usually where we have a humbling event emotionally, that causes us to wake up to deeper introspective work, deeper healing within ourselves, maybe healing our childhood wounds and traumas, healing our adult traumas. And the biggest adult trauma for most men and women alike is divorce or a significant breakup. That could be an emotional trauma. Certainly in my case, losing a child was an emotional trauma. Sadly, yesterday I heard really bad news where a dear friend of mine just lost his son. And so, the birds just crossed by. And so when we're not in a good place, that's where timing plays a role in it as well. And last, and most importantly, this is what makes a man choose one woman over another, is the woman he's chosen has a greater level of self-love. Coming back to my book, What the Heck is Self-Love Anyway? Self-love isn't just, oh, I love myself, and self-love isn't manicures and pedicures and facials and massages. That's, by the way, self-care. Self-love is self-respect, self-reliance, self-confidence, self-esteem, self-worth. That's all wrapped up into self-love. In other words, what attracted me most to Marie, she had this air of confidence. In other words, I could tell she doesn't give her power away to anyone. She never gave her power away to me. See, what I don't like about feminine energy coaching is some of it is almost predicated on giving your power away to men because men are the leaders of the relationship and you just need to follow their lead. Well, you could be following the lead of a real jackass. So be careful about giving your power away. And giving your power also means you're dependent upon the other person to fulfill your emotional needs. I always say, a lot of people in the United States here are suckling on the nipple of, I need you to love me so I can feel good about myself. That need for constant validation. So a woman who is in a state of self-love doesn't need that validation, doesn't need that love. They may desire it, and that's okay to desire it. But to actually come from a dependent place isn't really loving on oneself. And a lot of men can sense that woman who doesn't value herself because she needs someone else to validate them. And that gets tiresome and some men actually thrive on that, but those aren't the men who are really going to go the distance. Oh, by the way, I just recognized I forgot to mention one thing going back to users, spenders, and growers. Really quickly, users are the kind of people that are takers, 20%, the growers that want to build a life. Those spenders, I really didn't dive into that. Spenders are men or women who want companionship, connection, and sex, but they're not really solid on their desire for commitment. if you're not really solid on your desire, or you're not capable of commitment, they may come across as saying, I want a relationship, I want a relationship, I want a relationship. But they're not really in the capacity to lean into that relationship because they're just not in a good place. And those are typically those spenders. They want to spend time with you. They want that companionship, connection, and sex, but they're not in a good place. Okay, I just forgot to elaborate on that earlier. All right, we just covered why a man might choose one woman over another. I hope you found value in this. If you did, please hit that like button. Please share this video. Please subscribe to my channel. Check out all the links below to a free discovery call with me. Check out my group called Midlife Love Mastery. You can check out the group below and join me on Instagram. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this video as I always do. And by the way, before, I'm sorry about the lighting change. I'm going to wrap it up as I always do by giving myself a big, gigantic Jonathon Bear hug of self-love. I'm going to reach into the camera and give you a hug of love if that's okay. I'm going to ask you to turn to someone, a pet, a teddy bear, a pillow, and give it or them a hug of love, because hugs are a great source of love. And let's face it, we could all use more love in our lives. Thanks a bunch. Bye-bye now.